Hey, my name's Nate Johnson. I currently work with a digital software curriculum company, and I'm workshopping ideas to make Christian curriculum and Christian schooling affordable to low-income students both nationally and internationally.
My name is Vanessa DeGia. I am a literacy integration specialist over at Arthur Ashe Charter School in New Orleans.
And we have presented to our clients, but they've asked us again in a week to present to more of their stakeholders. So we were in Buffalo and studying who stays, who leaves, and why in the Buffalo Promise neighborhood. Real quickly, just to understand the Buffalo landscape. Buffalo was reticent to integration in the public schools. And then in the 70s, they went full initiatives and within years receiving national praise for their initiatives. And basically the judge who court-ordered integration was quick to declare other cities should have done it the way we did it. Statistics tell a different tale. White flight did happen, even though Judge Curtin said it did not. In fact, in the 50s and 70s, it was dramatic. And where the race movement corresponds directly with socioeconomics and it impacts the Buffalo Promise neighborhood, which is to the right of the red line. This is from the census data, and it's showing the concentration of poverty. Main Street, which is a red line, is not just the boundary to Buffalo Promise neighborhood, it's the boundary between districts, the suburbs and the cities. And there is a sharp difference between the socioeconomic status to the northwest versus inside Buffalo's city schools and Buffalo Promise neighborhood. So there's a correlation, we know this, between race and socioeconomic status, and we also know, and Duncan and Renee are quick to tell us in their research, there's a correlation between socioeconomic status and academic achievement. And this GIS map really illustrates this. You can see in the middle where the Buffalo city limits are, as in the light blue where it's shown, it's where the lowest median household income is. And the overlaid on top are schools, and typical of many grades and subjects, we just chose 8th grade math. And the size of the yellow circle indicates the achievement gains. The largest one represents meeting proficient standards. Below that is nearly meeting and not meeting at all. And what we're going to see is there is only one school represented here that meets proficiency standards. Only 11 students out of the entire Buffalo Promise neighborhood attend that school because it's a very highly selective magnet school. Now what we're seeing in Buffalo is not dissimilar to what we see in large city contexts. In fact, it's almost identical as you see in both the 8th grade ELA and math scores and the graduation rates. The comparisons of large cities and Buffalo school districts are about the same, but it's very different from the rest of New York State.
So Buffalo Promise neighborhood is the 14215 zip code in Buffalo, New York. And Buffalo Promise neighborhood is really focused on revitalizing the neighborhood and creating economic redevelopment. Their strategy is really focused in on the school system and really focusing in on K through 12 schools and school transformation. So they have identified 3 of the lowest performing schools within this footprint, and actually 2 of the lowest performing schools, with one high-performing school as the model for the 2 other schools. The high-performing school is relative. Actually, when you compare it to other schools, it is waning in achievement and is actually lower performing now than it has been in the years past. This school is Westminster Charter School. And Westminster Charter School is a K through 8. And actually, just quick side note, Dr. Rudolph, who's an alum of this program, he's the principal over there. So Westminster is the model for Highgate Heights, which is the public school. And Highgate Heights is the public school that not as many parents really choose. They choose Westminster over Highgate Heights. And the third school is a high school, Bennett High School, which is the lowest performing school in the state of Buffalo. So their goal is wraparound services, cradle to career services, cradle to career support. And they have 4 different aspects of their program, Buffalo Promise Neighborhood does. Early foundations, school transformation, college and career, connections, and family and community engagement. So in their program theory, the goal is to have Buffalo Promise Neighborhood students who live in the footprint to actually attend Buffalo Promise Neighborhood schools. So if you have BPN students attending BPN schools, they will be able to access BPN services. Okay? And as a result, they'll have, ideally, a solid foundation for college and career, and will be able to give back to the community as they get older. In this context, though, Buffalo Public Schools is currently in a school choice model, which creates tension for Buffalo Promise Neighborhood, because Buffalo Promise Neighborhood would like their students to attend these schools. However, parents can choose otherwise.
More than attention, it's a real challenge. In fact, we were able to use longitudinal data, a student data set for 5 years, 2008 to 2013, for all BPN resident students. And we're able to track which ones left the neighborhood to attend schools and which ones stayed in the neighborhood. And in fact, the results we found are sharper than what BPN originally gave us of how many students are actually leaving the neighborhood. And you're going to find between 3rd and 8th grade, it's anywhere from 80 to 85% of the students are choosing schools outside the neighborhood. The next two stats are illustrated here. On average, 80% are leaving. That means 20% are staying. But at an even faster rate of departure, 1 out of 10 non-African American students, whites, Hispanics, Asians, are staying. 90% are leaving, and the same for students who are receiving SPED services. So as we take the challenge and move towards the data collection and analysis, we set up this conceptual framework that relies heavily on Test and Bell's research. And really, it's focusing in on what do parents prioritize? What are the factors that influence their choice? And then where do they go to find information that informs those factors? It's clear, parents prioritize first academic quality, academic achievement. And then right after that, academic focus, academic themes like magnets, curricular focuses. After that, parents prioritize safety and then proximity. It's important to understand the ranking because if a parent finds a school that's academically stronger and more safe but farther away, the first two will supersede the proximity factor. So they know what they want, but where do they find the information to inform it? First and foremost, they depend on their social networks, their relationships built on trust, people they trust. And what they will say is the information they receive from a friend who knows a friend or a friend who's a parent in a school, that's unbiased, hotter knowledge, information than what a school will tell them, because the school's biased, right? Secondly, after that, they do rely on school-based resources, specifically school visits, and then school brochures, and thirdly, formal resources at large, websites, district information. And then we know the choice that parents make then has long-term repercussions, the achievement, the peer influence, the future trajectory, college, and career.
So this leads us to our project questions. Why do parents choose BPN schools? Why are they opting out of BPN schools? And what are the ramifications? What are the implications for BPN?
So we set up this heuristic, this formula, where parent choice is going to equal parent characteristics plus student characteristics plus school characteristics. So let's operationalize that.
So we have a multi-pronged approach in terms of our data collection strategy. We have school data from New York State Education, and that encompasses 38 schools. We also were able to interview 4 principals, 3 principals within the footprint, and 1 principal outside of the footprint. We were able to interview 2 community stakeholders from within the footprint. We were also able to look at student achievement data across 5 years, which encompassed 2,749 students. And on the parent end, we were able to distribute surveys for BPN and non-BPN parents that garnered 256 responses, as well as conduct parent interviews. We were able to interview 20 parents from within the BPN footprint. 10 of those chose BPN schools, and 10 of those opted out of BPN schools.
So some of the limitations, specifically with the parent survey, trying to collect surveys in this context was quite difficult. And in fact, our response rate was double to triple what BPN and BPS attempts have been in the past. But it's still at the end is about 10 to 11% of the populations we want to represent. We surveyed 4 schools, a BPN charter, Westminster, a BPN public, Highgates, and then a BPN a non-BPN public, which is Lydia Wright, and a non-BPN charter. So in all, you have to take that into account as we make generalizations, because there's some threats to external validity, but at the same time, the interviews provide some concurrent validity, and the recommendations we give would not be undermined even if the counterfactual should be true. So I touched on most of the limitations. You can touch on the qualitative.
Well, on the qualitative end, the generalizability is really tough because we used a lot of we interviewed a lot of parents, we did not use them, but we interviewed parents who actually recommended other people. We had a really tough time finding parents who wanted to be interviewed and parents who had time to be interviewed. So we were able to find new parents through workplace, through family members and friends. So this may not be indicative of the entire population.
Okay, so moving into our findings. The first finding that's very clear is dealing with social networks and parents' dependency on their networks. We're going to pull in 3 graphs to really illustrate this. Almost identical to Teskey's research, the parents we surveyed, 62% depend on friends for information about school choice. Following that, at almost 50% is school personnel, and then third, school visits at 40%. Under that, we have parent satisfaction. And the reason we have these 2 charts together is because what we found in our research, 98% of parents who are very satisfied with school are very likely to recommend the school to others. That's the 62% of friends who are informing people about their schools. 98%, if you're very satisfied, you are recommending that school. However, only 61% of somewhat satisfied parents are very likely to recommend their schools. So why is this an issue? Because what we found in our parent survey is non-BPN parents are significantly more likely to be very satisfied than BPN parents. And what we can take from that is those parents then are more likely to recommend their schools.
What we've also found is that BPN parents who are participating in BPN services are more likely to recommend BPN schools. So we have a BPN parent here who is participating in the Parent Achievement Zone, which is a program designed to help new parents become better parents. And as a result, she actually has a child in the Children's Academy, which is a Head Start program for BPN. And she is so invested in BPN that she knows that when her child is ready for high school, her child is going to Bennett High School. Regardless of the fact that right now Bennett is one of the lowest performing schools, she believes that BPN will follow through on its promise and will transform Bennett into a high performing school. This other parent here, she is disappointed in academic quality, but the social network is more important to her than the academic quality of the school. And she says that she actually has considered putting all of her students out of the school, but has decided to stay because the community is so strong.
Next finding, we focus on academic quality. And as Tesk's research pointed to, parents do prioritize quality first. And we found in our survey as well, 47% prioritized academic quality as the #1 factor. And right after that, it's a thematic curricular focus, like a magnet school. And the second most important reason, other factors came out, specifically size and safety in the schools. So we know that parents are prioritizing academics, and we know that parents are seeking their friends and social networks to inform them about the school's academic quality. But what are the school's academic quality, right? What does the data say about schools' academic qualities? And that's where we're able to go to a much more robust data set, which is our student data set that has almost 3,000 students, all living in BPN, but 80 to 85% leaving for non-BPN schools and 15 to 20 staying. And we're able to run some OLS regressions when we control for gender and for race across 3rd through 8th grade, ELA and math, so that's 6 grades, 2 subjects per grade. There's no observable differences between the students who leave the neighborhood versus those who stay, with 3 exceptions. And in those exceptions, 1 exception says BPN students perform stronger, and then 2 exceptions where BPN students do not perform as well. But in general, there are no observable differences.
So what's the dependent variable in
Yeah,
your regression?
thank you. The dependent variable are the students' test scores, ELA scores, and math scores for each grade, 3rd through 8th grade.
That's the dependent variable?
That's the dependent variable. And so the question is, does school, when you control for everything else, what impact does school choice have on test scores?
Okay.
Right? And there's no observable differences. Now, we're also able to run a regression to where we control for school, and we also control for gender, and able to identify race as the independent variable and its impact on test scores. And what we were able to find, every grade, both subjects per grade, non-African Americans, whites, Hispanics, Asians, perform significantly higher than African Americans, 3/10 to 4/10, which we're talking scaled scores, 1 to 4. That's very substantial in the difference. And why does this pertain so much to our study? Because we already noticed that non-African Americans, whites, Hispanics, and Asians are leaving the neighborhood at a faster rate, which has implications on the academic quality and the peer base of the neighborhood schools. So there's a perception gap. Parents, they're looking for academic quality, they're finding information on academic quality, and they're choosing schools thinking they're getting academic quality, but the data does not distinguish the schools they're choosing from the BPN schools. This is just another way to look at it. It's one very typical chart. It's from the New York State Education Department, and it compares 8th grade ELA scores. Blue does not meet proficiency standards. Green is nearly meets. Yellow is meets, and orange is exceeds. So if you're looking for schools that the mean scores are meeting proficiency standards, you need to look for yellow and orange colors. And really, the only school that substantially attains where the mean score meets proficiency standards is City Honors. We've already talked about City Honors. In fact, very few students, 12 students from VPN attend City Honors because it's such a high criteria selection. But the rest of the schools are where 20 or more BPN residents attend, and the mean scores are failing to meet proficiency standards across the board. And then taking it now, looking at the high school and using graduation dropout rates, there is more variance. And Bennett is at the bottom, but Bennett has company. There's actually 5 schools in this sample of 18 that their dropout rates are greater than the graduation on time rates.
In fact, when we interview all parents, all of our 20 parents, when we interview them and ask them, what do you know about Bennett High School? They all mentioned the dropout rate and the graduation rate. They mentioned Bennett's low graduation rate. 100% of Westminster parents have applied to non-BPN schools. These are amongst the interviews, right? They have applied to non-BPN high schools such as Tapestry or Hudge Tech because they believe that's where Westminster children go. That's where our students go. We don't go to Bennett. So another finding that we have found is the concern of safety, particularly in the transition to high school. And we have found parents, alumni of Bennett High School, have expressed this love for Bennett's prior performance as this really high-performing school. And these are alumni actually from the 80s, and 80s and prior. And they talk about the importance of Bennett as a school to be respected, but they would not put their children there. This parent here is a parent of a child at Highgate who is planning to opt out of BPN High School, out of Bennett, because of that. She would rather have her child go to a school like City Honors, but the challenge is that City Honors is definitely a harder school to get into. Another parent is a parent of a child at Westminster who is planning to opt out of BPN for high school. This parent is very concerned about the leadership and the instability of leadership at the school. There's been a lot of transition, 4 different principals within 1 year. And they feel that the instability is reflected in the instability of the school itself, and concerned about the safety in the school because of that. The final parent, she says, I'm looking for a non-bullying school, and if there are police there, my child doesn't belong there. In terms of BPN awareness concerning the surveys, only 1 out of 256 respondents have said that BPN is the most important factor in choosing a school. So one thing to really note is that when BPN parents are interested in the schools, in BPN schools, or they have experienced the success and the opportunities that BPN has to offer, they are more likely to talk about the school and share on their social networks. However, there are parents who have noted through their observations that they don't really think that BPN parents even know about BPN and what BPN has to offer. So what are the implications for BPN? As we move into our recommendations, we really want to consider the school transformation issue and what BPN can do to change the way that they interface with BPN, with their schools, in order to increase enrollment at their schools.
One last step as we're moving to recommendation is just outlining the findings we just discussed and be able to label what does it look like, how do we define that parent who stays in BPN schools and the parent who sends their children to non-BPN schools. Parents that stay in BPN schools are less likely to be satisfied, less likely to recommend their school, yet we know at Westminster, parents with postgraduate degrees are more likely to send their kids there versus the other 3 schools in the survey set. And parents perceive Westminster has a high academic quality, and that's what keeps them there. And parents who prioritize size are more likely to choose BPN schools. Parents appreciate the discipline and cohesive environment at Westminster. They're not sure that BPN gets credit for that, but they appreciate it. And parents depend on BPN as an informational source. So where parents are unaware predominantly of BPN, when they do know about BPN, they're much more likely to choose BPN schools. So that's the encouraging note for our clients. Parents who leave are more likely to be satisfied, more likely to recommend their schools, more likely to be white, Hispanic, Asian, or their child to be in SPED services. Yet their children are not necessarily performing better. Parents are more likely to transition out of the neighborhood with going into high school. And most parents who are leaving, they're not well informed at all about BPN services. So taking what we have, moving to the recommendations. Parents prioritize academic quality, then safety. They rely on recommendations from their social networks over formal resources. Very satisfied parents are more likely to recommend their schools to their networks. Yet many BPN parents perceive that non-BPN schools are stronger academically and safer. So our recommendations are going to be centered on changing these perceptions. And specifically, our client has asked that we give one clear pathway instead of many recommendations. They want to hear one clear recommendation with a pathway to address the perception gap.
So as we really focus in on the existing social networks of this school, of this particular program, we're looking at the factors: the perception of academic quality, BPN awareness, the transition to high school, as well as social network. And we looked at what was happening in Boston Public Schools, and we noticed that they had a parent ambassador program. And we think that this is something that could be very positive for Buffalo Promise neighborhood, to create a parent ambassador program. And in that, we are looking to have BPN parent ambassadors as a network of BPN parents who volunteer as Goodwill ambassadors. And these Goodwill ambassadors are for the BPN neighborhood, the Buffalo Promise neighborhood. As a result, they are able to increase BPN awareness within the BPN footprint through parents who are very satisfied with BPN. And this ties to our finding that if you are very satisfied, you are more likely to recommend. So really, instead of focusing on the 80% of the people who are leaving the footprint, let's focus on the parents who really care about BPN, and let's leverage them and mobilize them to really increase enrollment at our schools. So what can these ambassadors do? They can lead parent tours at the school.
Yes, specifically, we saw that 40% of parents depend on school visits as a source of information. Yet, at the same time, parents do not prioritize information given from schools. So by mobilizing our parents to provide the site visits, to be tours, we're expanding our own parents' reach in their social networks, and what they say is more credible in the visitor's eyes than if a school official had said it.
Right. We want them to participate in BPN's community events, as well as represent the BPN parent voice at district meetings, local meetings, and so forth. The benefits to this are to share experience in their schools, to actually talk about why BPN has positively impacted their lives. and to have to have experiences in community stakeholders' homes and workplaces, because we noticed that even in the extant literature, it shows parents share more about their lives in the workplace. The end goal is increased enrollment of students living within the BPN footprint, and more families will be able to access those wraparound services. So here's our plan of action. First, identify the parents, and then go ahead and execute that program. We are going to have them create satisfaction surveys. We suggest that you create satisfaction surveys. Conduct these surveys at BPN events, and identify who the very satisfied parents are. We've also considered having a website available for parents to self-select into this program if they've heard through word of mouth that this program exists and they're very excited about it. And then ideally have a personal connection to the parents and personally invite them into this program after they've been identified as very satisfied. After that, we execute the program, create training for the ambassadors. What do these parent tours look like? What does it look like to represent BPN on an informal and informal basis? Host events that reveal, an event that reveals the ambassador program to Buffalo, as well as have the ambassadors host parent events throughout the academic year.
Sorry.
That's fine. Ultimately, the parents will be able to talk about their experiences with their social networks, formally and informally, both through formally and informal venues.
So we have secondary recommendations we include in the capstone. We focus first on changing parent perceptions, but obviously if you can change academic quality, that will go a long way with perceptions, and we strongly recommend the compilation of closing achievement gap strategies by the Oracle and Murphy, and we unpack that to a degree. But for the presentation, we want to be very clear. This is your first pathway. As far as research goes, there are a lot of questions about the impact of school choice, on neighborhood schools, the community in neighborhood schools, and further research needs to inform these issues of, is school choice impacting academic performance, specifically in Buffalo? How is it impacting a neighborhood when the majority of students are leaving the neighborhood? And then specifically, if the schools are at a greater distance, how does that impact students in extracurricular activities, parent involvement, especially if the students are dependent on transportation?
All right, thank you.
If I'm understanding your findings correctly, and I may not be, there's a chance of that, but is there a real gap between what the objective data says about the academic quality of the Buffalo Promise neighborhood schools versus the perceptions of the parents?
There's a perception gap, and at the same time, there's a reality gap. If you're a parent, you're not leaving Buffalo, your child's not getting selected in city honors, where are you going to go, right?
What are your choices?
What are your choices? In fact, there were 500 parents who requested a change of school this past year, and because of availability, only 100 were granted it. So is there even really school choice is the bigger question. And so if school choice isn't enhancing students' options, at the same time it's undermining neighborhood communities, right? That's one of the questions.
Okay, well, what I'm getting at here is I think you've got sort of a social construction of reality going on around the choice process from the parents' point of view. But if that's the case, then what would the training program for the ambassadors look like? If here you've identified these people that are satisfied with the schools, and so now you want to help them communicate with other parents to try to influence them to go to Bennett and BMP, I guess is the name of it, or whatever it was. Now, what would that training program look like? What would you be concentrating on? Would you have the real positive attributes of the school, or if the academic quality is lacking, how would you address that? What would the content of the program be?
Well, we would go back to the conceptual framework and really think about the literature and think about what are the key aspects. So in terms of academic quality, they may see academic quality being a reflection of that might actually have to do more with like school size or what's going on in the classrooms. So I think that the program in itself would, well, first of all, the program is designed to help them lead school tours. So as they lead school tours, they would highlight the successes of the school over the past couple of years, particularly because BPN actually just started in 2012. So there may be examples. There may be examples of how the school has improved in terms of academic quality that may not be specifically data-driven, but just examples of how they know that the school has improved.
Well, at any rate, I think that training program is the key thing. You know, if
Yeah.
you want that ambassador program to be successful, that training is really real critical.
Absolutely.
Because they're going to have to be trying to influence other parents.
And it's creating the venues, right, to whether it's the school visits or creating more formal opportunities and putting those parents front and center before their peers versus thinking, I, the school official, need to address this group.
Sir?
Very well done. Hopefully when I make this comment, the Oracle will agree with me.
Who's the Oracle?
Tell me more about transition to high school. You may have known 2 times about kids are leaving at that point with high school. What has the client commented on as to what they are doing about that, or what your recommendations are for that transition to high school?
Well, our recommendations definitely are grounded in a lot of Murphy's work, where it's really about personalized learning and academic rigor. However, the client right now is really focused on leadership and what leadership looks like, and that's why there have been 4 different principals in 1 year. They're not finding the right fit, and the principal may not be the profile that we're looking for of what a principal should be, of who a principal should be. They may not have that DNA, right? So we really want to think, for them, I think that would be a really great recommendation to really share with them, like, this is the kind of principal that you should be looking for, because they're really trying. They want Bennett to be a better high school, but they may not necessarily know what those facets are.
Brian, it's interesting you asked that too. Bennett is a law magnet school, and it took me 15 minutes to find their multi-million-dollar courtroom that's in the school. They've moved away from the DNA that they began to establish the school 10 years back. And so they really, as they think about rebranding Bennett, it needs to go back intrinsically. What is Bennett about and what distinguishes it from other schools? And they keep bringing in leaders who bring in their own programs versus going into the roots of their students.
And actually, we actually talk about in our recommendations the application of the 4 frames, because they're so focused on the structure, like this is what we need to do now, but they don't really think about the symbolic piece, the importance of being able to leverage their alumni. There's a lot of pride in this community for who Bennett is as a school, but they don't really leverage that.
Oracle, do you have any comment?
No, ma'am.
Thank you, Drew, very much.